Tales from the Jails with John G. Sutton. That's me, by the way. Right, I'm going to talk today about a strange incident that happened when I was working at WORMWOOD SCRUBS. It was a Saturday evening, and I was the officer in charge of the hostel. Now, the hostel stood at the time, I don't believe it still does, in front of the Twin Towers. Now, if you look at WORMWOOD SCRUBS, the standard image of WORMWOOD SCRUBS is Twin Towers with Elizabeth Fry and John Howard in relief on the actual towers. The big oak and iron gate, and about 15 yards before that, if you're looking at the jail, it's on the left-hand side. There was a big building there, an old building, and in there was the hostel. Now, the hostel was a halfway house, for the prisoners who were on long-term sentence, like life, or coming to the end of a 20-year sentence, whatever it was, or a long sentence. And they worked in there, they lived in there, and they worked in London, on various projects, to try and rehabilitate them, get them back into society. Now, I was on there, it was a Saturday evening, I was the officer in charge, and my duty was to make sure all the inmates were checked in by 11 p.m. at night. They were allowed out till 11 p.m, you see. Anyway, it got to be about 11:15, and everybody was in, apart from one inmate, So, nothing I can do, he's not there, but I had to ring the numbers in to the principal officer in charge of the main prison. So, we're going through this, it gets to be about 11:10, and he turns up, and he was absolutely bladdered, he was totally inebriated, shall we say. So I said to him, "You're obviously pissed, lad. Come and have a cup of tea with me, I'll make you a cup of tea." I said, "I'll write it up in the book that you were 10 minutes late, but it doesn't matter, because nobody is going to read the book. And I haven't phoned the numbers in yet, so you're not reported as missing. So I'll write it in the incident book, but there won't be any repercussions, because, as I said, nobody reads the book." "Oh, that's great, kind of you, boss. Yeah, you're a good bloke, So anyway, sit down, have a cup of tea. And he wanted 2 sugars in his tea. I remember it quite distinctly. I said, "Have you had a good day?" "A bloody day, what a great day I've had." And he told me this strange story about how he'd been into this store in London's West End. He said something to me like, "We ordered them into the back room, we tied them all up, and then we got what we wanted, and they thought we were policemen and all this, that, and the other." So I said, "Oh, well, it sounded like fun, And I thought he was a fantasist, because I knew he was an armed robber, but he was coming to the end of his sentence, and he was being rehabilitated, and he was being housed in the hostel. So I never thought any more about this, but it was a strange story, and off he went to bed, and I thought no more about it. I was studying for a diploma in sociology at the time, so I got on with reading my homework, Anyway, next morning, handed the hostel over to the main prison, and another prison officer came in and took my place. And I set off walking back home to where I lived in East Acton. As I was going home, I passed a newspaper shop, so I thought I'll get a Sunday newspaper and have a read of the newspaper before I have a proper sleep, because I've been awake most of the night, because that was my job, you see. Anyway, on that night anyway. So I got a copy of the Sunday Mirror, and it said on the front page, big headlines, "Armed robbery in London's West End." So I thought, that's interesting. I'll read that when I get home. So I went home, I'm sat there at the breakfast table, usual style, reading the paper when I'm eating my cornflakes. And I'm reading this story, and it says the robbers ordered us into the back room of the shop. It was called the Jean Junction on Oxford Road. Ordered us into the back of the shop and told us they were policemen, and then they tied us up to the chairs and robbed us. It was exactly the same story that this prisoner who'd come in late had told me. Something going on here, you know. I mean, 2 and 2 together, it was him, because he told me at 11:10, and the press, the Sunday papers, would not have been printed until about 3 o'clock in the morning. So he couldn't have read it in the papers. So at the bottom of the story it said, any information, please ring West End Central CID. In other words, the flying squad, the Sweeney, you know. So I knew what my duty was. My duty was to report it to the prison. But I'd had experience of reporting matters to the prison in the past. And I had absolutely no faith in these buffoons that were running it, because they were just, I don't know whether they were corrupt or whether they were just completely and utterly incompetent, or maybe they just wanted to keep everything quiet, you know, no, don't make a wave, that kind of thing, you know. Because I'd previously told them about, they had an IRA inmate there, and I wanted to search his cell, and they wouldn't let me. I said, listen, you take responsibility for this. I said, I believe you've got to search his cell. No, I will not do that. 2 days later, he's on the roof of the Scrubs, dressed up like a soldier, and with a tricolour, you know, an Irish flag, and mock uniform on. He'd obviously been hiding it in his cell, and if I'd have searched his cell, I would have found all this. But the senior staff, including the head of security at Wormwood Scrubs, wouldn't authorise that. So I knew fine well there was no point in me telling them about my suspicions about this inmate in the hostel, because they wouldn't have done anything about it. Well, they might have done something about it, but it wouldn't have been to get him arrested. So I phoned West End Central CID. They came down, saw me, took a statement from me, took me into East Acton Police Station. This guy came into the room when I'd just made the statement, and he said, I'm Chief Inspector such and such a body. And he said, I'm very interested to hear what you say. Will you tell me the story again? So I told him exactly what I'd told everybody else, you know, that I was the hospital officer. I was the officer in charge of the hostel, yeah. And that he'd come in drunk and told me this story about holding the people up put them in the back room of a shop and all the rest of it. He said, well, I think you're right. He said, I think that this man has done this job. He said, and we're going to go and search the hostel. He said, now I'm going to take you to a telephone and I want you to ring the governor at Wormwood Scrubs and tell him we come in. So I did. I said, you're not going to be very happy, you know. He said, it's very serious, this. He said, ring him up. So he gave me the phone. I rang up the Scrubs, and I managed to get through to Norman Honey, his name was, the governor. And I said, it's Prison Officer Sutton here. I'm at Ealing Police Station with Detective Chief Inspector such and such a body. We're intending to attend the Scrubs and raid the hostel. Oh, I said, I don't believe you. I said, well, I'll hand you over to Detective Chief Superintendent, whatever he was. So I handed the phone over to this senior police officer, and he told Norman Honey exactly what the score was. And Norman Honey said, I'm sorry, I don't believe this. He said, well, get your security department to ring Ealing Police Station and ask to speak to Detective Chief Inspector such a body. He said, that's me. Well, to put the phone down, nearly half an hour passed before the telephone went, and for him to answer. And on the other end wasn't Norman Honey, it was the head of security for Wormwood Scrubs, a principal officer. The numpty that had refused to authorise my searching of the IRA. Right, so he said, yes, you can come down to the hostel and I'll see you outside the hostel. So we get 3 cars, I think there was, and they were all tooled up, these guys, you know. Got the shooters and all. So we're screeching through the streets of London, da-da-da-da, to Sweeney. yeah, just like you see it on the television, yeah. So we get to the hostel, jumped out the cars. This principal officer standing at the front of the hostel, and he said to the chief inspector, he said, I'm principal officer such and such a body. He said, I have to advise you that you will not be allowed to search the hostel today, because it is standard practice in the prison service that we do not search property that belongs to inmates unless they're present. And currently there is no one present in this hostel. No one present in the hostel. It was about 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Yeah. Now, where'd they all gone? Anyway, this chief inspector said to him, he said, I don't really care who you are. He said, but you see that van over there, because one of them had come in a van. He said, I can certainly see it. He said, well, you will be in the back of that, arrested for obstructing the police if you don't get out of my way. He said, now, Mr. Sutton, would you show me the way in? Well, they'd locked the bloody door, hadn't they? Locked it all up. So I said, I don't actually have a key. I said, but I'll show you how to get in. I ran at the door and kicked it off its hinges. Seriously. Boom, straight through the door. Whoa, me and the Sweeney went running in, and they searched the place. They found imitation police uniforms, false identity cards for police, all sorts of stuff, that incriminated this individual in the robbery. And they said, right, brilliant. They said, obviously him. I said, well, where's everybody gone? And they checked the incident books. I knew what the incident books, I'd written it up. And in it, everybody was booked out within 20 minutes of me making that telephone call to Norman Honey. Everybody was booked out. And the inmate who told me he'd done all this thought I was a numpty or something like that. He disappeared, and he was not seen again. It was 2 years later that I got a telephone call from the police in London saying, we've finally caught this guy, and when we've caught him, he's admitted to he's been doing other armed robberies, and he wants this one taken into account. He said, and we went through the file, and there is your statement. He said, and I tell you, you are absolutely right. He was the man who'd done it. He did it. He said, but in the event that he pleads not guilty, changes his plea, will you come up to London? I said, certainly, just send me a witness summons to the governor, and I will definitely appear. Because they weren't too keen on cooperating with the police. For some unknown bloody reason, they weren't. So that's my little strange story, and it's told in my book, folks. You can read it in my book. There we are. That's the original book. That story is told in my book. And now, oh, by the way, I didn't get, the police put me in for a commendation for that. What do you think I got? I'll tell you what I got. An official warning from the Home Office. In the event that I did not follow the protocol of the prison service in future, then my career would be terminated for helping the police. How about that? That's a song dinger, by the way. Yeah, so you all done a runner now, but I'm still going to torture you. All those who are still here, you're going to hear me singing now. Not particularly, but it's a Dubliners song, I like the Dubliners. And this is The Fields of Athenry. By a lonely prison wall, I heard a young girl calling. Michael, they've taken you away, for you stole Trevelyan's corn, so the young might see the morn. Now a prison ship lies waiting in the bay. Low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the wing. We had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. By her lonely prison wall I heard a young man calling. Nothing matters, Mary, when you're free. Against the famine and the crown I rebelled, they cut me down. Now you must raise our child with dignity. Low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the wing. We had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. I think that's enough of that, don't you, eh? I reckon they've mowed them into the ground now when they heard that. All that'll be left is a few sods. Tales from the Jails with John G. Sutton.